Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Post. Every end of the year, there's lots of biopics. They're always big, kind of Oscar movies, and a lot of times those movies become hit movies, and people see them and they learn about the real-life events or the piece of history that biopic is about. And I think oftentimes those biopics care more about the subject they are covering than the filmmaking itself, or let one or the other take over. I have rarely seen a biopic take on both the filmmaking and the real-life story with such reverence as I have with a film like The Post. Steven Spielberg moves with this film. I know this film was made very quickly, something he sometimes does. I think the last time he really did that was Catch Me If You Can, which really had a real energy to it. This feels like a thriller. This feels like an important journalism film, but this also feels like a populist movie. You know, there are parts where the audience members are clapping and cheering, and that's not because I live in liberal New York or something. That's because the movie flows in that way. It moves in that way. It wants the big conversation piece when somebody says something important to make you stand up and cheer. And there's no one who can do that better than Steven Spielberg. He can take something that's about some kind of a piece of journalism, about a 700-page report, and make it feel as real and as important to you as kind of one of his big blockbusters. And as much as you want to talk about how he represents what Hollywood became and this big kind of popcorn, you know, roller coaster ride type of movie, he brings all of that skill to something like The Post, and it is so enjoyable. I rarely see biopics that are this populist and this good. This is mainstream Hollywood filmmaking running in all cylinders and being the best it can be. It just runs so well. You kind of almost excuse its maybe cheesier, kind of lamer elements, but Spielberg's so good at twisting and turning those things. You're just kind of so happy with what's kind of on screen and what you're getting to watch. This is a very fun journalism film. You know, this was written by two screenwriters, Josh Singer and Liz Hannah, and Josh Singer previously wrote Spotlight. And Spotlight is not a movie like I really like that much, but it's a good movie. But I think the difference between this and Spotlight is Spotlight oftentimes I felt like I was watching a TV director. I didn't feel like it was very cinematic. And The Post doesn't do that. You know, I can read so many articles about how the direction in Spotlight was really amazing and, you know, it's subtle and all this crap. And Steven Spielberg does not need you to write an article about how good his direction is. He is going to make you see how good his direction is. He does all the Spielberg wonders. He does all these great camera shots on things. He has this level of love for what he's covering. He never kind of ruins it with that love. It's kind of interesting, I think, of his recent biopics. This might be my favorite because he really nails the period from like just there's Xeroxing things and that feeling that Xerox used to have when the light coming from it felt the way those used to feel, like those older machines, but at the same time he's making it feel very cinematic and exciting. There's tons of ways he's referencing 70s films. Obviously he very much studied All the President's Men, but the way All the President's Men was the big cinematic film it was, and it's not just because it's about Watergate and the big investigation and had Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford at an amazing time and things like that. It's also because that film is an amazingly well-made movie, as well as talking about a story, as well as being very well told. It is very cinematic. The way the camera moves in there, it has inspired filmmakers. Even David Fincher's Zodiac is very inspired by All the President's Men. Most films that are shot in a newsroom are completely referencing All the President's Men, but it's because the filmmaking is so alive and there's a real filmmaking sense to it. It's very cinematic while also being about these great characters and things, and The Post is made in that tradition, and this is the first time he's cinematically referenced the 70s as much as he ever has. Particularly I think with the Meryl Streep character, he's referencing kind of like Jane Fonda women empowerment films and stuff, both very cinematically. Like he knows what he's doing with his camera, but he knows what his camera is referencing at the same time. It feels like he was studying 70s films and really got to see how beautiful and how great and how cinematic those films were, while also wrapping it up with his own style. You can tell the kind of cheesiness and the Norman Rockwell parallelisms that are all throughout his style that he really presents in this. Steven Spielberg believes in America. He believes in the system of government. He believes in all those things. This is probably the most subversive kind of thing he's ever done. The most political active thing he's ever done is make a film like this at this time and in this political landscape, but he almost wants it to mean more than just at this time, and he understands that. I think he, more than anyone, understands that after a few years this film will live on and will be examined. This film could play 20 years from now and could play now and still be just as impactful because the storytelling and the direction is absolutely there in that regard, but he's being politically active while also being kind of like this like Boy Scout director that he's always been, which is just really cool. It's like he's in his comfort zone, he's using all his tools, he's doing everything that you expect from a Spielberg thing, the excitement and this energy he has throughout it that he's used before, and he almost understands how he's doing it while also being, you know, kind of political, which is cool. You don't see a lot of mainstream filmmakers use their talents in such a way that Steven Spielberg does in this. This might go down as one of his better directed recent films that isn't necessarily about something exciting. I think a lot of directors would fall under the importance of all this. He gets the importance of all this, but he also knows how to make it important to you, and if there's anyone who knows how to play an audience, it's Steven Spielberg. Now, this is based on the Pentagon Papers and the whole brouhaha that happened throughout it, where the New York Times published part of the Pentagon Papers. They got into some legal trouble with the US government and could not publish the rest, and then the people at the Washington Post, right when they were trying to make the company public, so there was a lot at stake at the time, were able to get the rest of the Pentagon Papers, which basically shows a serious doubt on the Vietnam War and how the government had realized that they were never going to win this war for a very long time through various different presidents, including Nixon, who was the president at the time, and how they could just destroy the Washington Post when it was probably at its most vulnerable, but they also felt like it was important for the American people to know, especially because so many people were going over to Vietnam and dying, because it was kind of a fool's errand that they knew they should have gotten out of many years before. So this film was rushed into production. I bring that up because I think the energy to it that he had, since he had wanted to get this out this year, I think really works for this movie. Very few films that get rushed into production, you talk about that being a plus. One of the interesting things is obviously it was made because of the Trump administration and things like that, and his treatment of the press, and clearly Spielberg believes in the press and believes in the freedom of the press, is that it also brings in the point of Meryl Streep's character, who is based on a real person, who was the publisher and ultimately made the final call on whether they should publish the Pentagon Papers information or not. The character is probably the most interesting to talk about because first you could say, oh, it brings up the Me Too movement, especially what's been going on with that movement and everything like that. It kind of was an opportunistic thing that happened, and certainly Spielberg is not going to shy away from his opportunistic nature, but I don't think he was necessarily trying to play into that as much as that sort of just happened. In a lot of ways, she is a character who is very much from a previous generation, does not want to be involved in this, never wanted to be at this position. But you could also say that she has to step up and she has to learn how to do the right thing. And I think a lot of people will read into the fact that there is a level of sexism within her life. She's being undermined, particularly as a woman, and particularly that most people don't feel safe of her company going public and her being the head of that company because she is a woman. I find it interesting that she talks about how she never wanted this, how she's kind of forced into this role. And it's very pro-feminist, but it's also bringing up the ideas that this woman was forced into this role. And it's not because of feminism she was, it's just because of a matter of circumstance and so forth. But her kind of regret, she's a very apprehensive protagonist. Like, she doesn't want to be in this situation. She doesn't want to ruin her friendships. She generally feels like she enjoys like the idea that, you know, the men are going to talk about politics and the women will go into a separate room, which happens in this film. Like, that's been her life, even though she's the publisher of the Washington Post. Like, that's ridiculous, and I agree that that's ridiculous. But she talks to her daughter, played by Alison Brie, is like she never wanted that. She was fine with her husband, that when she got married, her father gave the newspaper to her husband who she had married, and she was happy with that, and she was fine with that. And I think Meryl Streep is able to play it in a way where she respects that that's who this woman was, and how much she gave up for this, and how much she totally changed her life, and how uncomfortable that made her, and how apprehensive she was. She didn't want to ruin these relationships. She liked her life before. She liked being this kind of society woman, but she knew what was the right thing to do, and she did it. Sarah Paulson's character brings up, people debate on that moment feeling a little too forced or something, but I think it is kind of something that needs to be said, because it's sort of a complex view of a female character, because I think you can get into the whole female empowerment thing, that's definitely there, but I think it's interesting to go into the fact that she is doing something that she's incredibly uncomfortable with doing. She's in a role she does not necessarily want to be in, but she's trying to find the right way to do it, and she ended up empowering like tons of women, and she ended up being a huge important part of American politics. Now, she wasn't in All the President's Men. I don't know enough of that whole true story and whether, you know, maybe it made sense not to have that character. Can't really speak on that. I haven't seen All the President's Men in a while anyway. It is interesting how much Spielberg really pushes her character, even credits Meryl Streep first, which is kind of cool because him and Meryl Streep have never worked together before. So the first great Meryl Streep performance in a Steven Spielberg film lives up to all of the stuff that Spielberg can do and all the kind of complexities Streep can do, because Streep understands how the audience is going to see it and kind of plays in a populist way where like she definitely feels like this is the right thing to do. She enjoys doing this work. She enjoys being involved in this. She enjoys like continuing her family's legacy and the importance of that, but she also is like, I never really wanted to do this, and I find that to be so fascinating. It's such a complex female character in a lot of ways that doesn't necessarily play into the ideas like you want her to be sick of the idea that she's hanging out with the women while the men talk about politics in the other room, but she's not sick of that. But she also understands how a lot of these societal things that have been going on, particularly her relationship and close relationship with people in Washington, will have to end for the greater good. And it's like totally change your lifestyle in that certain way. Whether that lifestyle is something you agree with or you would want to be involved in is a crazy thing. And to understand that lifestyle while also understanding she's doing the right thing and changing, it's so thought-provoking and so smart and such a great character. And Spielberg did that so well. And I think Tom Hanks, who continues to do great work with Spielberg, and I think this shares a lot with Bridge of Spies, where he takes something that is important to him, it's an idea that's important to him, it's a piece of history that's important to him, and he makes it fun and interesting for you. The idea that it like cares about America and wants you to care about it, wants you to cheer for the ideals of America, all the Frank Capra-ist elements that Spielberg represents. And I think having Tom Hanks in this works. He obviously is playing a character, Ben Bradley, that Jason Robards played in All the President's Men, and that's very defined how we view Ben Bradley most of the time. Tom Hanks was able to play it in like kind of the correct way, where it definitely felt like his version of that character and wasn't too indebted to Jason Robards. If there's anyone who was kind of living under the shadow of All the President's Men, it could have been Hanks, but I think Hanks is so good. I do think we sort of underappreciate how good he is, particularly recently, especially with this and Bridge of Spies. Tom Hanks is able to do that so amazingly well. It's just, I just love seeing him on screen, but he works so well with an ensemble that you kind of just get into him being kind of this curmudgeon-y, you know, newspaper editor, and having literally like a murder's row of character actors, from Alison Brie to Tracy Letts to Sarah Paulson to Jesse Plemons to Matthew Rhys to Michael Stahlberg to Bradley Whitford to Zach Woods, to one of the weirdest things, that having David Cross and Bob Odenkirk reunited together in a lot of scenes with Tom Hanks. I mean, I think that's just amazing, and they're really good, and it's not like inappropriate. I didn't notice any Mr. Show references. This is like watching like the Philadelphia Story or something in terms of like a crazy cast. So you're like, holy shit, all these people are in the same movie. Obviously he's Spielberg, so he can like call all these people and they'll do it because of who he is, but he really knows how to cast this out. Everyone's so good in this. Even having like Jesse Plemons and Bob Odenkirk having like this mini like Breaking Bad reunion sort of thing. Just a lot of really great performance. And Jesse Plemons, I love Jesse Plemons and stuff. He's so good in this, and the fact that he has to do some really commanding stuff against some of like the most prominent, bigger actors of this age or of the past 30 years is just, you know, speaks highly of him as an actor, that he can nail that as well as he does. I don't think a lot of people will come out of this thinking of how good he is, but they really should. Even like how Spielberg often, with the 70s thing, would do a lot of overlapping dialogue. Like, he clearly was mentioning Altman as well as All the President's Men. Altman was such a big influence on the 70s. It's interesting that the overlapping dialogue thing happened a lot. I know it was because it's Spielberg, it was a lot more planned probably than Altman did it, but that spirit was there, that 70s spirit. But he still, it's interesting, there's this scene where they're going through the Pentagon Papers. Tom Hanks's character, Ben Bradley's daughter, is selling lemonade out front, but then just decides to sell lemonade in the house because more people are there, and they'll just give her money and stuff, and she gets like tons of money. And that's such a Norman Rockwell thing that Spielberg would do, but it works within the scene. It's like kind of shows like, yes, they have a family, and I think a lot of kids stuff becomes like sort of naturally something that you'd imagine in a Norman Rockwell painting. Spielberg's able to have that aw shucksness and that classic Hollywood kind of believing in America thing, while also being cynical, while also showing like the huge scandal that the Vietnam thing was. And for him to take on a subject that I think could just overload a film and you could just want to tell you the facts in it, and they do that, never feels inappropriate. This is the guy who is about good filmmaking and smart filmmaking and well done filmmaking. I mean, hell, the reason we make myth of a movie like Jaws is like, how many good shark movies are there other than Jaws? Like, it's like there's no substitute, and he knows how to do that. In a way, he's made kind of one of the best journalism films to come out in recent memory. He just like knocks it out of the park because he knows how to use the camera. He knows how to naturally do these things that everyone else, when they do them to show off. They go, hey, look, I'm doing a big tracking shot. Look at this big tracking shot. It's so fucking in your face. And that's neat sometimes or whatever, but Spielberg doesn't do that. When Spielberg does a tracking shot, it's to show the chaos. It's to show a certain element. It's to show the environment. There are natural storytelling elements of why he's doing that. And he knows how to do that in such a way that it makes the post amazing, while also doing all these complex ideas, whether a newspaper should do this, the idea of should the public do this, the idea of journalism, the importance of journalism, the hunt of journalism, the hunt of creating something, getting everyone involved and doing something quickly. It's all within the post. This is a film that understands the importance of what it's talking about, but also understands that filmmaking is an important thing as well. And making a populist movie about something important might be maybe more important than just blandly making something about something important. They're kind of just putting it out there on the screen. There's certain drop the mic moments that Spielberg often does, and he does it in such a way as like the end of E.T., when that music's blaring and you can tell everyone involved is like, fuck you, this is the movie we made. John Williams was given a choice because of the production of this and Ready Player One sort of overlapped, and he could pick this or Ready Player One, and he picked this, and I think that says it all. This is an important film to Spielberg, and I actually for the first time saw an important director who cared about something, want the audience to care about it as much as they do, be as disgusted as they are, feel it as much as they do. And in a lot of ways, Spielberg wants you to believe in something. He wants you to believe in America. He wants you to believe in honesty. In a lot of ways, after when I saw The Post, it made me sort of believe in those things again too. So if you've seen The Post and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.